The observation deck of the Galactic Council station stretched across 200 meters of reinforced glass, offering a view of the swirling nebula beyond. Ambassador Henderson stood near the center of the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched various alien species mingle during the reception. This was humanity's first formal introduction to the greater galactic community, and every moment mattered. Beside him, his 8-year-old son pressed his face against the glass, counting the ships docked at the station's massive rings. Had debated bringing the boy to such an important event, but the Galactic Council had specifically requested that humans demonstrate their family structures. Apparently, many species found the concept of raising offspring communally fascinating. "Dad, that ship has 6 engines," said, pointing at a massive vessel shaped like a crescent moon. "Why does it need so many?" "Different species, different designs," replied, keeping his voice low. Across the room, he could see Lieutenant Sophie Grant speaking with a group of diplomats. She caught his eye and gave a subtle nod. Everything was proceeding according to plan. They arrived precisely on schedule. They entered the observation deck in a tight formation, their scales gleaming under the station's artificial lights. Each stood nearly 7 feet tall, with muscular builds and reptilian features that spoke of a predator species. Commander led the group, his crimson scales marking him as high-ranking military. Stepped forward to greet them, staying close to his side. "Commander, welcome. I am Ambassador Henderson representing Earth and her colonies." His eyes, golden with vertical slits, studied for a long moment. Then his gaze dropped too. "You bring a juvenile to diplomatic proceedings." "We bring our families to important events," said calmly. "It's part of our culture." "Curious?" His tone suggested he found it more foolish than curious. "The Empire does not coddle our young. They are raised in training facilities until they can contribute to society." Looked up at the towering alien with wide eyes but said nothing. Placed a gentle hand on his son's shoulder. The reception continued for another hour. Introduced various human representatives to their counterparts, while Sophie managed the flow of conversation. They seemed unimpressed with humanity's achievements. They had conquered 12-star systems through military might, while humans had barely begun exploring beyond their own solar neighborhood. During a lull in the formal discussions, moved to one of the data terminals along the wall. His clawed fingers moved across the interface with surprising delicacy as he accessed Earth's public database. Several other officers joined him, their attention fixed on the screen. "This is one of them asked, his tone dripping with disdain. "A planet of extreme weather, aggressive predators, and limited resources." "Earth shaped us," said, moving closer to the group. "We adapted to our environment." Scrolled through images of Earth's various ecosystems. He paused at an entry labeled Honey Badger and enlarged the image. The creature on screen looked small and harmless, with distinctive black and white markings. "This creature," said, turning to with what might have been amusement, "is listed in your database as one of Earth's notable predators, yet it appears no larger than a hatchling." Opened his mouth to respond, but spoke first. "Honey badgers are extremely dangerous," the boy said seriously. The officers turned to look at the child. Several of them made a hissing sound that had learned was their equivalent of laughter. "The human juvenile believes this tiny creature is dangerous," said, addressing his companions. "Perhaps humans lack proper understanding of what constitutes a threat." "But they are dangerous," insisted, his voice earnest. "My teacher showed us videos. Honey badgers fight lions and hyenas. They climb trees to raid beehives even though bees sting them. They have really thick skin that protects them, and they never give up once they start fighting something." Leaned down, bringing his face level with, "Small creature, you claim this animal fights predators many times its size." "Yes, sir," nodded. "They're fearless. They don't care how big the other animal is. They just keep attacking until the other animal runs away or dies." "Fascinating," said, though his tone suggested he found it ridiculous rather than fascinating. "And why would such a small creature behave so foolishly? Does it not understand it should flee from larger predators?" Frowned, thinking hard about the question. "I don't think honey badgers know how to give up. My teacher said they're persistent. That means they keep going no matter what." The officers exchanged glances. One of them brought up additional images of honey badgers on the terminal, showing the creatures in various aggressive poses. Another clip showed a honey badger fighting off a group of jackals, its small body moving with vicious efficiency. Your people celebrate this animal? Asked, standing to his full height again. We respect it, corrected. On Earth, we learned that size doesn't always determine danger. Some of our smallest creatures are our deadliest. Then your species has much to learn about warfare and power, said flatly. The Empire has conquered countless worlds. We understand that strength comes from size, numbers, and superior technology, not from the delusions of small creatures that refuse to acknowledge their place in the natural order. Sophie appeared at his elbow, her expression neutral but her eyes alert. She had clearly heard the exchange and recognized the shift in tone. Commander, she said politely, perhaps we should move to the formal dining area. The Council has prepared a meal featuring cuisines from multiple worlds. Waved a dismissive hand. We require no sustenance at this time. Continue your reception, Ambassador. The Empire will consider whether humanity merits further diplomatic engagement. He turned and strode toward the exit, his officers falling into formation behind him. Watched them go, his jaw tight. I didn't mean to make him angry, said quietly. You didn't do anything wrong, assured him. You told the truth, that's always the right thing to do. Sophie waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. They're more dismissive now than when they arrived. That conversation about the honey badger seemed to convince them we're not worth their respect. I noticed, said. He looked down at the terminal where the image of the honey badger still filled the screen. The creature's small eyes seemed to stare back at him with absolute fearlessness. Dad tugged on his sleeve. Did I say something wrong about the honey badgers being dangerous? Knelt down to meet his son's eyes. No, you said something very true. The problem is that Commander doesn't understand what that truth means yet. Will he figure it out? Stood, his gaze following the direction they had departed. Through the observation window, he could see their ship beginning its departure sequence. Eventually, he said softly, let's just hope he learns before it costs lives. Sophie's communicator chirped. She glanced at the message and her expression tightened. Sir, our intelligence division just flagged increased military communications, fleet movements near the border of human space. His hand found his son's shoulder again, protective and firm. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command. The War Council chamber aboard the flagship was built to intimidate. Curved walls of dark metal absorbed light rather than reflected it, and the central platform stood elevated above the surrounding floor. High Admiral occupied that platform now, his black scales marking him as one of the oldest and most decorated warriors in the Empire. Commander stood at attention below, flanked by his senior officers. They had returned from the diplomatic meeting 3 days ago and had summoned them immediately upon their arrival in space. Your report, Commander, said, his voice like gravel grinding against stone. The humans are weak, Admiral, replied with confidence. Their diplomatic representatives brought juveniles to formal proceedings. They celebrate tiny predators from there as if size and ferocity were unrelated. Their ships are small and lightly armed compared to our vessels. Descended from the platform, his movements deliberate, and their military capabilities. Limited from what we observed, they have established colonies on 17 worlds, but their defensive installations are minimal. They seem to believe diplomacy will protect them. Pulled up a holographic display showing human territory. Their resources are abundant, rich mineral deposits, suitable agricultural worlds, strategic positions near 3 major trade routes. You recommend conquest, said. It was not a question. I recommend we claim what they are too weak to defend. The human worlds will fall within weeks, perhaps days, gestured at the display. We begin with their colony at New Portland. It sits at the edge of their territory, far from Earth. By the time there responds, we will have established control. Another officer stepped forward, younger than but with intelligence in his eyes. Admiral, the humans were polite during negotiations, almost submissive. They deferred to our experience in galactic politics, acknowledged our military superiority. This could indicate they understand their position and might surrender without significant conflict. Studied the hologram for a long moment. The Galactic Council will object to unprovoked aggression. The Council objects to many things, said dismissively. They lack enforcement capability. By the time they convene to discuss sanctions, we will control enough human territory to make diplomatic complaints irrelevant. His clawed hand swept through the hologram, enlarging the image of New Portland. The colony world showed green continents and blue oceans, remarkably similar to Earth itself. Population readings indicated roughly 2 million human colonists. "Prepare the Fourth Fleet," ordered. "Commander will lead the assault on New Portland. Take the world intact if possible. Dead colonists cannot work the mines or farms." His chest swelled with pride. "It will be done, Admiral." On New Portland, Governor Lisa Moore sat in her office reviewing the morning reports when the priority alert cut across her screen. She read it twice, her stomach sinking with each word. "Ben," she called to her intercom, "get to my office now." Defense Coordinator Ben Carter arrived within minutes, his weathered face creased with concern. "I saw the alert, fleet movements. Heading this direction." Lisa pulled up the intelligence data. "Earth Command estimates they'll reach our system in 48 hours. Fleet composition suggests invasion force, not exploratory mission." Ben leaned over the desk, studying the numbers. 12 capital ships, 40 support vessels, and estimated ground troops numbering in the thousands, against our 4 orbital defense platforms and 3,000 militia members. "We need to evacuate," Lisa said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Evacuate 2 million people in 48 hours, Ben shook his head. "The transport capacity doesn't exist. Even if we could, where would they go? The nearest human colony is 3 weeks away at maximum speed." Lisa stood and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the colony's central district. People walked between buildings, going about their daily lives. Children played in the parks. Farmers tended crops in the vertical gardens that fed the population. "I've sent requests for military support to Earth Command and the nearest fleet position," she said. "Response time is estimated at 3 weeks minimum." "Then we're on our own," Ben said quietly. "We fight," Lisa turned to face him. "We can't evacuate everyone, and I won't abandon our people to occupation. We make them pay for every meter of ground." Ben nodded slowly. "I'll activate the emergency protocols, get the civilians into the shelters, arm the militia, prepare defensive positions." He paused. "You know we can't win this, right?" "We don't have to win," Lisa replied. "We just have to hold long enough for help to arrive, and we make sure they understand that taking human territory comes at a cost." Within hours, New Portland transformed. Civilians who had been shopkeepers and teachers and farmers yesterday began weapons training today. Every adult colonist had received basic combat instruction, a requirement for settling frontier worlds. Now that training would be tested. Captain Adrian Cole arrived on the next transport from Earth's outer defenses, bringing with him 2 companies of actual soldiers. It was a pitifully small force, but it was all that could be spared on such short notice. Lisa met him at the spaceport. "Captain, thank you for coming." Adrian was younger than she expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Governor, I won't lie to you. What I've brought isn't enough to stop invasion force." "I know," Lisa said, "but it's more than we had this morning. My orders are to coordinate your defense until the main fleet arrives. That means keeping you alive for 3 weeks against an enemy that could glass this planet from orbit if they choose to." "They won't glass it," Lisa said with certainty. "They want our resources intact. That means ground invasion, and that means we can make them bleed." Adrian allowed himself a small smile. "You've got spirit, Governor. Let's see if we can turn that into a viable defense strategy." They spent the next 30 hours preparing. Ben organized the civilian militia into defensive units, assigning them to key infrastructure points throughout the colony. Adrian's soldiers took the most exposed positions, preparing to meet the initial assault. Lisa broadcast a message to all colonists, explaining the situation honestly. She gave them the choice to remain in the shelters or join the defense. Nearly 70% volunteered to fight. The fleet arrived exactly when intelligence predicted. 12 massive warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their weapons arrays gleaming like teeth. Commander stood on his flagship's bridge, studying the planet below. "Scan for defensive capabilities." 4 orbital platforms, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "Minimal shielding, outdated weapon systems, several small patrol craft, but nothing capable of engaging our capital ships." "Excellent," opened a communication channel. "Attention, human colony of New Portland. This is Commander of the Empire. Your world now falls under our domain. Surrender immediately and your population will be spared. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Lisa listened to the message from the colony's command center. Around her, Ben and Adrian stood ready, along with her senior staff. The room was silent as the ultimatum ended. "Send our response," Lisa said. The communication officer nodded and opened the channel. Lisa spoke clearly, knowing her words would be heard across the colony and recorded for history. "Commander, this is Governor Lisa Moore. New Portland is human territory, settled by human colonists under rights recognized by the Galactic Council. We do not acknowledge your authority here. Withdraw your fleet or face the consequences." Static filled the channel for a moment. Then's voice returned, filled with what sounded like genuine confusion. "You have no fleet. You have no significant military force. You cannot possibly resist our assault, yet you choose to fight rather than accept the inevitable." Lisa glanced at Adrian, who nodded. She took a breath and replied, "Commander, I believe one of your diplomats recently met a human child who tried to explain something about Earth's creatures. That child told you about animals on our world that don't back down, regardless of the size of their opponent. You should have listened to him." She closed the channel before could respond. "Think that made an impression?" Ben asked. "Probably not," Lisa admitted. "But in a few days we'll make an impression they can't ignore." Through the command center windows, she could see the fleet beginning its approach. Weapons systems powered up across 12 capital ships, and the first bombardment began. New Portland's orbital platforms returned fire, their guns blazing against impossible odds. They lasted 7 minutes before being destroyed. But in those 7 minutes, they managed to damage 2 support ships and prove that humans would fight back. In the shelters below ground, civilians held their children close and waited. The first dropships hit atmosphere 12 hours after the orbital bombardment began. Captain Adrian Cole watched them descend through his tactical display, counting the heat signatures. 47 transports, each carrying approximately 200 soldiers. "Almost 10,000 troops," he muttered, then activated his communication link. "All units prepare for contact. Remember your training and trust your squad leaders." Around him, the defensive position hummed with activity. They had chosen the colony's main power station as their first stand, a structure that would need intact. The building sat on elevated ground, giving Adrian's forces a clear view of the landing zones. Ben Carter crouched beside him, checking the charge on his rifle. "My people are in position at the secondary sites. How long do you think we can hold here?" "Against this many?" Adrian glanced at the older man. "Hours if we're lucky, but hours matter. Every minute we delay them is another minute for civilians to reach safety and for reinforcements to get closer." The dropships landed in formation 3 kilometers away, their ramps dropping to release waves of soldiers. The aliens moved with military precision, forming up into assault groups with practiced efficiency. Adrian raised his hand, signaling his troops to hold fire. "Let them come closer. Let them think this would be easy." They advanced across the open ground, their weapons ready but their formation loose. They had fought countless battles against species who broke and ran when faced with superior numbers. They expected the same here. "Wait," Adrian breathed into his calm. "Wait." They reached the 500-meter mark, 400, 300. Now, the ground beneath the advancing aliens erupted. Ben's civilian engineers had spent the last day placing improvised mines across the approach routes. The explosions tore through the formation, sending bodies flying and creating chaos in their ranks. Before they could recover, Adrian's soldiers opened fire from their elevated positions. Rail guns and pulse rifles cut through the confused aliens, dropping them by the dozens. The scattered seeking cover and returning fire. Their weapons were more advanced, their armor better than anything the humans had. But the humans had chosen their ground well, and they fought with desperate intensity. "Target their officers," Adrian called out, "the ones with the red markings." His troops adjusted their aim, picking off the commanders. Without leadership, the assault faltered. The aliens pulled back, regrouping beyond the minefield. "First round to us," Ben said, breathing hard. "How long before they wise up?" "Not long," Adrian replied, watching the reorganize. "They'll come back with heavier weapons and better tactics. We need to relocate before they call in air support." They abandoned the power station 20 minutes later. leaving behind more traps and surprises. As Adrian's forces melted into the colony's urban areas, gunships reduced the power station to rubble. Commander watched the engagement from his flagship, his claws digging into the armrest of his command chair. Explain how a handful of human defenders destroyed an entire assault company. His ground commander's voice came through tight with frustration. They used terrain advantage and improvised explosives. Then they retreated before we could bring superior firepower to bear. Then pursue them, snapped. They are infantry without air support, without armor, without hope. Run them down and eliminate them. But the humans refused to be run down. They split into small groups, using their knowledge of the colony's layout to strike and fade. They turned the streets into killing zones, the buildings into fortresses. Every intersection became a battlefield. They learned quickly that human weapons, while less advanced, could still kill. And humans had an unsettling tendency to keep fighting even when wounded. One squad cornered a group of human militia in a residential building. The aliens had superior numbers and better equipment. It should have been a quick execution. Instead, the humans barricaded themselves on the upper floors and fought room by room. They used furniture as cover, threw homemade explosives down stairwells, and shot from windows at approaching reinforcements. By the time they secured the building, they had lost 15 soldiers to kill 8 humans. And that pattern repeated across the colony. Humans defending positions that should have fallen in minutes instead held for hours. Small groups of colonists with hunting rifles ambushed patrols and disappeared before reinforcements arrived. Governor Lisa Moore coordinated the defense from a mobile command post that changed location every few hours. She tracked unit positions on a holographic map, directing resources where they were needed most. Adrian's group just hit another supply depot, her communication officer reported. Destroyed 3 transport vehicles and killed 27 hostiles before withdrawing. Casualties? Lisa asked. 2 wounded, none dead. They're falling back to Sector 7. Lisa nodded, updating the map. They controlled perhaps 30% of the colony now, but every meter had cost them. Their casualties numbered in the hundreds, while human losses remained surprisingly light. A new voice cut into her command channel. Governor, this is Maya Phillips from Shelter Complex 4. We have a situation. Lisa recognized the name. Maya ran the civilian volunteer coordination. Report. Troops are moving toward Shelter Complex 6. That's where we evacuated most of the children. The guards won't be able to hold against a serious assault. Lisa's blood went cold. She looked at the map, calculating distances and response times. Adrian's nearest unit was 20 minutes away, too long. Hold position, she told Maya. I'm sending reinforcements. But before she could issue orders, Maya spoke again. Ma'am, with respect, we're not holding position. We're going to get those children out. Maya, you're civilians. You don't have the training for direct combat against regulars. Governor, those are our kids. Training doesn't matter, we're going. Lisa closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with new resolve. Understood. I'm sending Adrian's team to support, but Maya, you keep those volunteers alive. We need everyone who can hold a gun. Yes, ma'am. Maya Phillips had been a teacher before the invasion. She had spent 15 years educating the colony's children, teaching them mathematics and literature and the history of humanity's expansion into space. Now she stood in the shelter's armory, distributing weapons to 40 volunteers who were mostly teachers, shopkeepers, and farmers. Listen up, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Are tough and they're trained, but they're expecting us to run or hide. We're not going to do either. We're going to hit them hard, grab our kids, and get everyone to the fallback position. One of the volunteers, a man named Greg who ran the colony's largest restaurant, raised his hand. What if they have air support? Then we get inside buildings and make them come to us, Maya replied. Remember, they want this colony intact. They won't level everything if they think it reduces the value of their conquest. They moved out in teams, using maintenance tunnels and service corridors to approach Shelter Complex 6. Maya led the first team, her heart pounding as they emerged 3 blocks from their destination. They were already there, surrounding the shelter entrance. Maya counted 30 soldiers, heavily armed and advancing on the doors. Teams 2 and 3 flank them, she whispered into her comm. Team 1, we go straight up the middle. Aim for center mass and don't stop shooting until they go down. Her volunteers spread out, taking positions behind walls and vehicles. Maya waited until everyone was ready, then triggered the detonator for the explosive charge they had planted in a nearby building. The blast wasn't large enough to hurt, though, but it made them turn, distracted and confused. In that moment of hesitation, Maya's teams opened fire. They reacted instantly, returning fire with devastating accuracy. 2 of Maya's volunteers went down in the first exchange, but the others held their ground, pouring bullets into the alien formation. Greg took a hit to his shoulder and kept shooting. A woman named Sarah, who had taught music to elementary students, used a grenade launcher to destroy a heavy weapons position. Everywhere along the line, civilians who had never expected to see combat fought like veterans. They began to pull back, surprised by the ferocity of the resistance. They had faced countless species in battle, but few fought this desperately over civilian targets. Maya's team reached the shelter entrance. Get the doors open, get those kids moving. Inside, nearly 200 children huddled with their guardians. Maya's people started organizing an evacuation, ushering the terrified children toward the back exit. But they were regrouping. Their commander called in reinforcements, determined to crush this pocket of resistance. That was when Adrian's soldiers arrived. They came from 3 directions at once, professional soldiers who knew exactly how to break an enemy formation. Adrian led the charge personally, his rifle cutting down with precise bursts. "Maya, get those civilians out of here," he shouted over the sound of gunfire. "We'll hold them off." Maya didn't argue. She got the children moving, her volunteers forming a protective corridor as they rushed toward safety. They tried to pursue, but Adrian's troops cut them off. For 15 brutal minutes, the soldiers held the intersection, trading lives for time. When Maya's group reached the fallback position with all the children safe, Adrian's team disengaged and followed. They had lost 3 soldiers in the fighting, but they had saved 200 lives. Commander received the reports of the engagement with growing fury. His forces controlled more territory with each passing hour, but the cost kept climbing. Human resistance showed no signs of breaking. "How many casualties?" he demanded. 417 dead, 623 wounded, his aide reported quietly. Against how many human defenders? Intelligence estimates between 3,000 and 4,000 total, including armed civilians. His claws scraped against his chair. 400 dead to pacify a colony that should have surrendered within hours. The humans fought like the creatures in their database, the small, fierce predators that refused to acknowledge when they were outmatched. "Increase the assault tempo," he ordered. "I want this colony secured within 24 hours. His aide hesitated. "Commander, perhaps we should request additional forces. The humans are proving more resilient than anticipated." "No," snapped. "We will not admit to High Admiral that we require help to defeat one human colony. We will break them. It is only a matter of time." But even as he spoke, felt doubt creeping into his thoughts. He remembered the human child at Admiral Jason Price stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Earth Defense Ship Vigilant, and watched the tactical display count down the seconds until they reached New Portland. His fleet consisted of 15 warships, smaller than the Force but crewed by sailors who understood what they were fighting for. "Status of the colony?" he asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant pulled up the latest intelligence data. "Ground fighting continues. They control approximately 60% of the main settlement, but resistance remains organized and effective. Estimated enemy casualties exceed 700. Jason felt a flicker of pride. The defenders had held for 18 days against impossible odds. Now it was time to even those odds. "Bring us in fast and aggressive," he ordered. "I want them to know we've arrived before they can adjust their formation." The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, their engines burning hard as they accelerated toward the planet. Alarms blared across the vessels as their sensors detected the new arrivals. Commander stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "How many ships?" 15 capital vessels, multiple fighter squadrons, his sensor officer reported. "Their human military confirmed Earth Defense Force signatures." "Impossible. Our intelligence said the nearest human fleet was weeks away." "They must have diverted from other assignments." "Commander, they're accelerating directly toward our position." His mind raced. His fleet was larger, 12 capital ships plus support vessels. But his forces had been engaged in ground operations for over 2 weeks, diverting resources and attention. And the humans were coming in with clear aggressive intent. "Recall all fighters," he ordered. "Prepare for fleet engagement. Signal the ground forces to expedite their pacification efforts. I want this colony secured before those ships arrive." But securing New Portland had proven harder than ever imagined. On the ground, Captain Adrian Cole received word of the fleet's arrival and allowed himself a grim smile. "All units, the cavalry is here. Now we make the pay for every second they've spent on our world." He had been fighting for 18 straight days with minimal rest. His forces had been reduced to less than half their original strength, but the arrival of reinforcements meant they didn't have to just survive anymore. They could win. "Ben, have your militia groups hit every position simultaneously," Adrian said into his comm. "I want confusion and chaos across the entire colony. Make them think we're launching a counteroffensive." "With pleasure," Ben replied. Across New Portland, human fighters emerged from hiding spots and struck at forces. It wasn't a coordinated military assault, but rather dozens of small, vicious attacks designed to create panic and disorder. Maya Phillips led her volunteer group in a raid on a supply depot, destroying ammunition stores and medical supplies. Greg, his shoulder still bandaged from the earlier battle, used his restaurant's delivery truck packed with explosives to take out a command post. The caught between preparing for a space battle and defending against renewed ground attacks began to falter. In orbit, Jason's fleet closed the distance. Lieutenant Sophie Grant, who had served as diplomatic liaison during the initial contact, now commanded a fighter squadron launched from Vigilance Hangar Bay. "All squadrons target their support vessels first," she called over the combat channel. "The capital ships are tough, but their logistics train is vulnerable." Her fighters screamed toward the fleet in tight formations. The aliens responded with defensive fire, but Sophie's pilots flew with reckless precision, weaving through the barrage. "Breaking into attack runs," Sophie announced. "Squadron 2, follow my lead." They dove toward a supply ship, their weapons blazing. The ship's shields held for a few seconds, then collapsed under the sustained assault. Sophie's final missile punched through the hull, triggering a chain reaction that tore the vessel apart. "One down," she reported, moving to next target. Jason watched the fighter engagement with approval. "Coordinate with Sophie's squadrons. I want those support ships eliminated. Once we cut off their logistics, the capital ships become much less threatening." "Yes, sir." His fingers danced across her console, feeding targeting data to the fighter groups. The fleet tried to form a defensive screen, but the human ships kept pressing forward. Jason had studied tactics during the journey to New Portland, and he understood their doctrine. They expected enemies to be intimidated by their size and firepower, to hold back and engage cautiously. He had no intention of being cautious. "All ships full attack formation," Jason ordered. "We're going straight through their line, target the flagship." His captains acknowledged the order without hesitation. The human fleet accelerated, focusing their fire on Commander's command ship. Felt his vessel shudder as human weapons tore into his shields. "Return fire. All batteries concentrate on their lead ship." But the humans refused to slow down. They drove forward like predators who had scented blood, absorbing damage but never breaking formation. 2 human destroyers took critical hits and fell out of line, but the rest kept coming. "They're insane," his tactical officer said. "They should be maneuvering defensively, not charging directly at our fleet." Coordinated the assault from her station aboard Vigilant. Target acquired, flagship shields at 70%, maintaining fire. Around her, the ship's weapons batteries hammered at the command vessel. Other human ships added their firepower, creating a concentrated barrage that the enemy couldn't fully defend against. Shields dropped to 50%, 40, 30. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "Break formation if necessary." But breaking formation meant abandoning the coordinated defense, and the humans exploited every gap. Sophie's fighters swarmed through the line, targeting engines and weapon systems with surgical precision. On New Portland, Governor Lisa Moore watched the space battle through her tactical displays. The ground forces were pulling back, their attention divided between the human counterattacks below and the fleet engagement above. "Adrian, they are retreating to their landing zones," she reported. "Should we pursue?" "Negative," Adrian replied. "Let them go, we've bled them enough. Now we let the fleet finish the job." In space, Jason's fleet had broken through the defensive screen. 5 support ships burned as debris, and 3 capital ships had sustained major damage. But the human fleet had paid a price too. 3 destroyers were crippled, and Vigilant herself had taken hits to her port side. "Admiral, the flagship is attempting to withdraw," reported. Jason studied the tactical display. Ship was indeed pulling back, its shields failing and hull showing multiple breaches. The other vessels were following, abandoning their assault formation. "Let them run," Jason said quietly. Then louder, "All ships cease pursuit. Reform defensive screen around New Portland. Get damage control teams working on our wounded vessels." Sophie's fighter squadron returned to Vigilant, their craft bearing the scars of combat. She climbed out of her cockpit and made her way to the bridge, still wearing her flight suit. Jason turned to meet her. "Good work out there, Lieutenant. Your tactics disrupted their entire defensive strategy." "They weren't expecting us to be so aggressive," Sophie replied. "They fight by a doctrine that assumes the enemy will be rational and cautious." "And we're neither," Jason said with a slight smile. "Not when our people are dying on the ground." Pulled up casualty reports. Final count, 3 destroyers heavily damaged but salvageable, 217 personnel killed or missing, 463 wounded. The numbers sobered the bridge crew. Jason closed his eyes for a moment, honoring the fallen. Then he opened a communication channel to the planet. "Governor Moore, this is Admiral Price. The fleet has withdrawn. Your skis are clear." Lisa's voice came through, thick with emotion. "Thank you, Admiral. Your timing was perfect." "How are your people?" "Bloodied but unbroken. We lost 800 civilians and soldiers during the defense, but we held. We made them understand that human territory isn't free for the taking." Jason looked at the tactical display, where the retreating fleet was jumping to faster-than-light speed. "They'll report this to their superiors. The question is whether they learned the right lesson." On the fleeing flagship, Commander slumped in his command chair, staring at the casualty reports. Over 1,000 dead in ground fighting, 3 capital ships damaged, 5 support vessels destroyed, and the human colony still stood defiant. High Admiral's face appeared on the communication screen, his expression unreadable. "Report, Commander." Straightened despite his exhaustion. "Admiral, we encountered unexpected resistance. The humans fought with determination that exceeded all projections. Their reinforcement fleet arrived and engaged our vessels with aggressive tactics that caused significant casualties." "You failed to secure a single human colony despite overwhelming numerical superiority," said flatly. "And you retreated when faced with a smaller fleet." "Admiral, the humans fight unlike any species we have encountered. They do not surrender even when facing certain defeat. They sacrifice themselves to protect civilians. They use tactics that seem suicidal but prove effective." Was silent for a long moment. "You met with human diplomats before this assault, did you not?" "Yes, Admiral." "And what was your assessment of them?" Remembered the diplomatic reception, the small human child explaining about honey badgers. He had laughed at the boy's earnest warning. "I underestimated them," he admitted. "We all did." "Then you will have opportunity to correct that mistake," said. "The Galactic Council has called an emergency." The Galactic Council chamber filled slowly as representatives from dozens of species took their seats. The circular room had been designed to give no single race a position of prominence, with the central platform rotating to face whoever was speaking. Today, that platform would see both humans and standing before the assembled delegates. Ambassador Henderson arrived early, as was his habit. Beside him walked his son, who carried a small data pad containing his school assignments. The Galactic Council had specifically requested that the boy attend, for reasons that would soon become clear. They took their seats in the human delegation section. Lieutenant Sophie Grant joined them, still wearing her military uniform bearing the marks of recent combat. She had returned from New Portland just 2 days ago, bringing with her documented evidence of the assault. Across the chamber, Commander entered with his delegation. The reptilian commander looked diminished somehow, his scales dull and his posture lacking its previous arrogance. Behind him came High Admiral, whose presence sent a ripple of tension through the assembly. The Council's arbiter, a being named from a species that resembled floating jellyfish, activated the central platform. Its translated voice echoed through the chamber. This emergency session convenes to address the unprovoked assault by the Empire upon the human colony of New Portland. We will hear testimony from both parties before determining appropriate response. Stepped onto the platform first. The Empire acknowledges military action was taken against New Portland. However, we maintain this was a legitimate claim of territory within a disputed region of space. Rose from his seat. The Galactic Council recognizes New Portland as lawfully settled human territory. There was no dispute until forces arrived with weapons charged. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Several species had their own border tensions and they watched the proceedings with intense interest. A's tendrils waved for silence. Commander, you led the assault force. Explain your reasoning for attacking a civilian colony. Stepped onto the platform and noticed the commander's gaze briefly flickering toward before he spoke. The Empire believed the human colony to be lightly defended and unlikely to resist. Our initial diplomatic contact suggested humans were not a martial species. We assessed that claiming their territory would meet minimal opposition. And what did you find instead? I asked. His claws flexed against his sides. We found a species that refuses to surrender regardless of tactical situation. We found civilians who fought like soldiers. We found defenders who valued protecting their young above their own survival. We lost over 1,000 warriors attempting to secure a single colony. The chamber erupted in shocked discussions. 1,000 casualties against a frontier colony was staggering by most species standards. Sophie stood and was recognized to speak. They chose to invade our world. We chose to defend it. Every human casualty on New Portland was someone fighting to protect their home and their families. We didn't start this war, but we finished it. A delegate from the species spoke up. But how did such a small defending force inflict such disproportionate casualties? They are experienced warriors. Glanced at, then made a decision. With the Council's permission, I would like my son to address that question. A's tendrils curled in what might have been curiosity. The human juvenile may speak. Stood looking very small next to the adults surrounding him. He walked to the platform with his data pad clutched in both hands. When he spoke, his voice was clear and earnest. Before the attack New Portland, I met Commander at a diplomatic meeting. He was looking at Earth's animal database, and he saw an entry about honey badgers. He thought they looked small and harmless. Activated his data pad, projecting an image of a honey badger onto the chamber's display screens. The creature appeared unremarkable, certainly not threatening by galactic standards. I tried to tell Commander that honey badgers are extremely dangerous, continued. They fight animals much bigger than themselves. They have thick skin that protects them. They never give up even when they're hurt. They don't care how big or strong their enemy is. They just keep fighting until the other animal runs away or dies. The boy looked directly at. I tried to warn you, but you laughed at me because honey badgers are small. The chamber fell silent. Every delegate now stared at the image of Earth's small, fierce predator. Looked around at the assembled species. Humans are from Earth. We grew up on the same planet as honey badgers and lions and crocodiles and poisonous snakes and spiders. We learned that size doesn't make something safe or dangerous. We learned to respect threats no matter how small they look. He paused, gathering his thoughts. The thought we would be easy to conquer because we're smaller than them and we don't have as many warships. But we're like the honey badger. We don't quit. We protect our homes and our families, and we make anyone who attacks us pay a price they'll remember. Felt pride swell in his chest as his son spoke. The boy was doing what experienced diplomats often failed to do, cutting through complexity to reveal simple truth. Addressed, Commander, the human child attempted to warn you about his species' nature. Did you consider his words? I dismissed them, admitted. I saw a child speaking about small animals and believed it reflected human weakness rather than strength. I was wrong. High Admiral stepped forward, his black scales gleaming under the chamber lights. The Empire has learned a costly lesson. We assessed humans based on their diplomatic behavior and limited military presence. We failed to understand that a species can be both peaceful and formidable. The humans defended their territory with skill and determination that commands respect. Rose again. Ambassador, is the Empire prepared to acknowledge human territorial sovereignty and cease hostile actions? His clawed hand touched his chest in a gesture of formal acknowledgement. The Empire recognizes human claims to New Portland and all other established colonies. We propose a formal peace agreement with clear territorial boundaries. And reparations for the damage to New Portland and the lives lost, pressed. Agreed, we will provide resources to assist in reconstruction. A's tendrils waved in approval. The Council witnesses this agreement. The matter will be formalized in proper treaty form. The Arbiter paused. However, the Council must address the larger implications of these events. The jellyfish-like being gestured toward the assembled delegates. The human species has demonstrated capabilities that were not apparent during initial contact. Several Council members have privately expressed concern about human military strength. Sophie stood again. With respect, the concern should not be about human strength. It should be about human nature. We don't seek conquest. We don't want to dominate other species, but we will defend our people with everything we have. Any species that respects that boundary has nothing to fear from humanity. A delegate from the crystalline species spoke. But how can we trust that human aggression will remain defensive? Many species begin with noble intentions and become conquerors. Still standing on the platform, raised his hand tentatively. May I say something else? A gestured permission. Honey badgers are dangerous, said carefully, but they don't attack unless you threaten them or their home. They don't go looking for fights. They just defend themselves really well when fights come to them. Humans are like that too. We explore and make friends and trade with other species, but if someone attacks our colonies or hurts our people, we fight back hard. The simplicity of the explanation seemed to resonate through the chamber. Complex diplomatic concepts reduced to an 8-year-old's understanding of basic fairness. Governor Lisa Moore's voice came through the communication system from New Portland. The Council asked to hear from the colony. I want to say that our people don't want war. We want to rebuild our homes and raise our children in peace. But we proved we're willing to fight for that peace. 18 days we held against impossible odds because we knew help was coming and we trusted our fellow humans to reach us. That's what humanity is. We don't abandon our own. Watch the other delegates absorbing this information. He could see calculations happening behind alien eyes, reassessments of humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy. The Galactic Council should understand something, said, his voice carrying across the chamber. Earth is a dangerous world. We evolved alongside predators and parasites and natural disasters. We learned to survive through cooperation, ingenuity, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Those traits made us successful on Earth, and they'll serve us well among the stars. He gestured to Sophie. Our soldiers fight fiercely because they're protecting their homes. Our civilians take up arms because they trust that fighting for their families is worth any cost. And our children can explain dangerous creatures from because we teach them to respect threats, not dismiss them. A's tendrils swirled in a pattern that indicated decision-making. The Galactic Council acknowledges humanity as a recognized species with full territorial rights and protections. We also note that humanity has demonstrated both the capacity for diplomatic resolution and formidable defensive capabilities. The Council recommends that all member species treat humans as valuable potential allies rather than targets for exploitation. Admiral Jason Price entered the chamber, still bearing marks from the battle at New Portland. The Human Defense Forces request formal admission to the Galactic Peacekeeping Coalition. We've proven we can defend our own territory. We're willing to help defend others who face unjust aggression. Several delegates exchanged glances. The coalition had been dominated by larger, more established military powers. Admitting humans would shift the balance. But after what New Portland had demonstrated, no one questioned humanity's qualifications. Approved the request with a wave of tendrils. So recognized, the council session is concluded. As the delegates began filing out, approached the human section. Tensed, but the commander's posture suggested submission rather than threat. Ambassador Henderson said formally, "Your son spoke truth that I should have heeded. I offer formal apology for my dismissive behavior and for the suffering my arrogance caused your people." Considered the commander for a long moment. Your apology is noted, Commander, but the people who deserve it most are on New Portland, rebuilding their lives from the destruction you caused. I understand. Turn to. Young one, you tried to warn me. You explained about the honey badger and its nature. I laughed and called you foolish. I was the fool. Looked up at the towering alien without fear. My teacher says everyone makes mistakes. What matters is if you learn from them. I have learned, said quietly. I will ensure that the Empire never makes this mistake again. As the delegation departed, placed his hand on shoulder. You did well today. You spoke clearly and helped them understand important things. I just told them about honey badgers, said, and about how humans don't give up. Sophie smiled. Sometimes the simplest explanations are the best ones. The whole galaxy now knows that humans are dangerous when threatened, just like Earth's honey badger. Across the galaxy, the story of New Portland spread through communication networks and diplomatic channels. The small colony that held against impossible odds became a symbol of human determination. The honey badger, an animal few alien species had heard of before, became synonymous with humanity itself. On New Portland, reconstruction continued. The 800 lives lost would never be forgotten, but the colony had survived. Children played in rebuilt parks. Farmers tended new crops. And in the town square, a monument was erected showing a honey badger standing defiant, with the names of the fallen inscribed beneath it. Governor Lisa Moore stood before that monument during the dedication ceremony, speaking to the assembled colonists. We were told to surrender. We were told resistance was hopeless. We were told we couldn't win. And they were right about one thing: we couldn't win by ourselves, but we didn't have to win alone. We just had to hold long enough for our people to reach us. That's what being human means. We fight for each other. We never abandon our own. In the rebuilt command center, Ben Carter worked alongside Maya Phillips, organizing the colony's new defensive systems. The Galactic Council had provided funding for enhanced protection, ensuring New Portland would never be vulnerable again. Think they'll try again? Maya asked, reviewing sensor logs. No, Ben shook his head. They learned their lesson, but there might be others who need to learn it too. Then we'll teach them, Maya said with quiet confidence. That's what honey badgers do. Admiral Jason Price's fleet remained in the New Portland system for another month, assisting with security and reconstruction. Then they departed for their next assignment, leaving behind a reinforced garrison and the knowledge that humanity would answer any call for help. On the long journey back to Earth, Sophie sat in Vigilance observation deck, watching the stars stream past. Lieutenant joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. Penny for your thoughts? Asked. Sophie accepted the coffee gratefully. Just thinking about how everything changed. A month ago, we were the new species trying to prove ourselves worthy of respect. Now we're members of the peacekeeping coalition, and every species in the galaxy knows our name. All because we refused to back down from a fight we couldn't win, observed. No, Sophie corrected gently. We won because we understood what we were fighting for. The fought to conquer territory. We fought to protect our people. That made all the difference. And across the galaxy, in military academies and diplomatic schools and civilian education centers, a new entry appeared in databases about notable species. Next to humanity's entry was a small image of Earth's honey badger, with a simple caption. Small in size, infinite in determination, dangerous when threatened, better as an ally than an enemy. Henderson would grow up in a galaxy where humanity commanded respect, where human colonies flourished under the protection of a growing fleet, and where the simple truth he had spoken as a child became wisdom that shaped relations. He had tried to warn them about the honey badger. They should have listened. Regarding our assault on New Portland, you will attend and explain your actions to the assembled species, including the humans. The communication ended, leaving alone with his thoughts and the knowledge that he had started a war he couldn't win. Diplomatic reception, speaking so earnestly about the small, fierce creature called a honey badger. Now he understood what the child had been trying to tell him. In defensive positions across the colony, militia members checked their weapons and remembered their training. And in the command center, Lisa Moore watched the enemy fleet descend and prepared to show Commander exactly what a cornered human could do. Seems to have already made their decision about humanity. Around them, the reception continued, but attention was elsewhere. In his mind, he kept seeing that image of the honey badger, small and fierce and utterly unwilling to back down from any threat. His son had tried to warn them. The head laughed. Soon suspected, they would understand why that had been a mistake.